Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, as I always say on every episode of this podcast, the show is actually about forgetting about technology or the hype that surrounds it, and learn more about how technology is actually transforming multiple industries and highlight real-world use cases and what people are doing right now. And today, I wanted to try and offer a helping hand to businesses and provide a greater understanding around the real-life capabilities right here, right now, of some of these emerging technologies, such as machine learning, and what they can do and what they cannot do. So I invited Ryan Bonnici on the show today to provide some inspiration and insights of what he can teach and share his experience at G2 Crowd. Now, G2 Crowd is a leading business solution review platform that leverages more than 170,000 user reviews, all to drive better purchasing decisions. Business professionals, buyers, investors and analysts all use the site to compare and select the best software and services based on these peer reviews and synthesized social data. Now, regular listeners will know that I spoke to the G2 Crowd CEO and co-founder Goddard Abel way back on episode 328. But today, Ryan Bonnici will share his unique journey and share some revealing insights from his work. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Chicago so we can speak with Ryan Bonnici, the CMO at G2 Crowd, about how he's driving growth at one of the world's leading B2B technology review platforms that's helping millions of business professionals make informed purchasing decisions every single month. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. So my name is Ryan Bonnici, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at a company called G2 Crowd. Gosh, a little bit about me. You can probably tell from my accent, though, that I am an Australian, and I've been living in the US for a few years now. Have kind of just always been in the tech business marketing space. From when I was a really little kid, I always knew I wanted to be a CMO. Go figure, how weird is that? Like a little kind of kid in high school just knew that. And so, yeah, I've kind of been really laser focused on that ever since I was kind of, my early 20s and was really fortunate to just last year. The year before last, technically now, the end of 2017, when I was around 29, became the CMO at G2 Crowd. Pretty awesome time. And before G2, I was at HubSpot, and before HubSpot, I was at Salesforce, and before Salesforce, I was at a company like ExactTarget and Microsoft. So a lot of really remarkable and innovative companies that I feel really, really lucky to have been a part of, especially during a lot of their crazy growth periods.
Now, although this is a tech podcast and we showcase how technology is transforming multiple industries on a daily basis, one thing that I'm really keen to get at is the very human stories behind people's success. And one of the things that put you on my radar was that you've had quite a unique career path, because I believe you started as a flight attendant while still in college in Australia as a way to pay the bills and see the world at a young age. Great plan. But can you tell me about the story where I think you met an executive from Microsoft on a flight one day, which actually launched your career in marketing for some of the world's fastest growing companies such as HubSpot, Salesforce, ExactTarget, and so many more? Because it's fascinating, isn't it, how sometimes the planets just seem to align and the universe gives you a nudge in the right direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The long story short, I guess, on that was, so I was a flight attendant with Qantas. I was an international flight attendant with them, based out of Sydney for 2 or 3 years. I started university at London School of Economics, and I kind of worked really hard in high school. And I started at LSE and I kind of just a few months in, realized I was burnt out and wasn't that into learning. And it was partly, I think, just because I'd worked really hard in high school. And so, I applied for a role with Qantas just on a whim, not really thinking anything of it, because I'd heard the stories about how hard it was to get those jobs because so many people wanted them, let alone international. And, I think a couple months later, and, they kind of took the list of applicants from 10,000 down to, I think they hired about 1,000 in the end. 100 people in the end. So then I moved back to Sydney, worked for Qantas for a few years, and It's funny because a lot of people ask me about that and they think that's kind of like what got me into marketing. The reality was I was already studying marketing before then, always knew I loved marketing and advertising, but I was kind of burnt out. And so I was also, though, still really fascinated in business and growth and companies and marketing. And so what I loved about the flight attendant job, obviously it was great to be able to travel and to save money when I was still really young. But I love the fact that I could connect with really, successful and interesting people, typically in, say, business class or first class when I was working there. I wasn't ever connecting with them, thinking anything of it. I was just that, I think, gosh, maybe it was 19 or 20, was this really kind of naive kid that just was obsessed with this idea of business and learning from people that were successful. And I really admire people that had done a lot with their careers. And so would just ask them questions. And I think they maybe saw this, young chap that was interested in them and asking lots of maybe interesting questions. And so, I used to have really great conversations with people. And this one time there was this Microsoft exec on the plane, and we were talking, and I then found out that they were about to take on a bunch of what they called Max, which is a funny term for Microsoft to have, but it basically stands for I think it's for Microsoft like Academy of something. It was like basically this career development program at Microsoft that was full time, that you could do while you were at university. So you'd work for Microsoft full time and then study full time. So it was pretty full on. I found out about that through the Microsoft exec, and then applied and went through that whole process. And then I was really lucky to be one of, I think, 8 folks that they brought on board in the Sydney Microsoft office. So, then was like living near Microsoft in the city, and then back at uni studying. And so it just really worked really nicely. And then Microsoft at that time, this is a long time ago now, was I think ExactTarget, which was one of the world's biggest email marketing platforms, that was bought by Salesforce, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago for a couple $2 billion. Microsoft was a really big customer of ExactTarget. And so I was using ExactTarget at Microsoft. And, a couple years in, then when ExactTarget launched their office in Australia, in Asia Pacific, their first office, they brought me on board as a partner marketing manager. And then I kind of was promoted to like field marketing. And then I ran all of marketing, hired everyone, and all of sales development, and was able to then build those teams in Sydney and in Melbourne and in Singapore and Japan with Salesforce. And it was an amazing experience. And, it was a really good acquisition. And, we connected really seamlessly to Salesforce. And that kind of like got me on my way. And it was funny, like as I started to move up at ExactTarget and then at Salesforce, I realized just how little I actually knew about marketing back when I was at Microsoft. And I try and remember that sometimes today, even like when I am mentoring and, trying to kind of help folks on my own team accelerate their careers and learn, is that if you haven't kind of worked in a few different types of marketing businesses where you understand maybe B2B and B2C and enterprise versus SMB, you just sort of, there's just some gaps that you don't realize you have. And I just so vividly remember once being in this meeting at Microsoft, and we were sitting down with sales and we were talking about case studies that we were going to build for them. I was just a good kid that was trying to do right and to do good for the sales reps so they could close business. But I never really understood like the concept of like a case study helps like a sales rep in the sales process help their prospects see the success that their existing customers had had to help accelerate the sales pipeline and then maybe close. And it was just a funny thing looking back. And so, it was a really amazing experience.
And here we are now, of course, in 2019. And like you said a few moments ago, you are the CMO at G2 Crowd, where you're driving the growth of the world's leading B2B technology review platform that's helping more than 1.5 million business professionals make informed purchasing decisions every single month. But for people that are just tuning in and hearing about you guys for the first time, can you just offer a bit of an overview of what G2 Crowd is, just for everyone listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you, I think, nailed it pretty well, Neil. So we're, the world's biggest business marketplace, essentially, where businesses buy software from us or services for their business. And so I think, when we started maybe 6 or so years ago, before I joined the business, we really started out of this kind of reality of, the founders had all been in software companies. They'd built software companies. They'd sold software companies to the likes of Salesforce and Oracle. And they always realized how broken the buying process was. And it's partly broken, because of the way software companies sell. There's oftentimes a bit of vaporware, I call it. And then the other component is like the analysts that are supposedly helping buyers work out what's the best software for them. It's a really horrible business, like the analyst business, and it's very pay to play. And I, like was in that business working as a marketer for these software companies, and had to jump through hoops. And if we would buy more reports, our rankings would go up, and if we didn't buy reports, our rankings would go down. It was just really horrible. And so, as a marketer in a tech company, you know too well sometimes that you just have to pay these big analyst firms if you want to be ranked well. And so our founders saw that and realized that was totally broken, and they kind of refused to do that for their prior companies. And so they realized that, hey, like with so much development in the internet, and the way businesses are growing and how much information they have access to, the buying process is going to change, and we can help kind of facilitate that. And so that's when they built the world's biggest business reviews platform, which is sort of where we started at. And now today we have over 500,000 reviews of software products on our site that are all validated. They're always being refreshed and updated, and there's always more and more coming. I think it's something like 100,000 net new reviews hits our site like every other month, sort of thing. It's wild, the amount of people that are using software and then reviewing software to help others. So that's where we started. But really kind of, I guess, where we've evolved to now is we started to realize that businesses today, Neil, can't really succeed without a few things. So there's, processes and strategy. They need to have like the right business strategy. They need to have the right people. And then they need to have the right technology, because so much of business today, even if you're a bricks and mortar store, right, there's still software technology that you use in store, right? And you have your employees. And so I guess we kind of saw that like that third pillar of business and businesses reaching their potential was technology, as well as process and consulting services. And so, we built this platform now today where, as you mentioned, millions of people every month come to not only discover and buy software for their business, but then now also with this company we acquired last year called Siftery, they can actually now manage and track all of their software spend. So they basically connect up their Concur or their Expensify, or even just like, their corporate Amex account. And what it does is it then looks at all of the different things that employees are expensing. And oftentimes, right, one team will be expensing maybe a productivity tool like Asana. Another team like marketing might be, using their corporate card for MailChimp, for an email tool. And this then helps like the company get that high level view of, hey, what are all the different tools and expenses that our business is paying for? And then our G2 track product then helps them actually not only track, but then optimize spend. So if we can see two teams are using, one team might have 15 seats of Asana and another team has 30 seats, our kind of algorithm will say, hey, like if you combined your seats together, you could get a better rate from Asana. Would you like us to help facilitate that? So it's really focused on helping the buyers. And I hope that kind of helps kind of folks that are listening that aren't as familiar maybe with G2 Crowd understand what we do now.
Absolutely. And one of the big reasons, of course, that I invited you on today is I believe you've got experience with artificial intelligence. And for many people listening, there has been a lot of hype around AI and a lot of exaggeration around certain elements of its capabilities. So I've always want to search for real world use cases and how businesses are actually using artificial intelligence, not in the future, but right now. So can you tell me more about how businesses are using AI and machine learning to actually improve their marketing funnels right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I think I'm 100% with you. I think that, machine learning, AI, all of that is a really big buzzword kind of like part of businesses today, but it also has really amazing potential. And I think what I see so often, especially, working for companies that have had amazing AI and ML kind of products, is that they're only as good as the data that you get in ultimately, right? So it doesn't matter how good the AI and machine learning in your CRM is, if your sales reps aren't tracking things properly, or the CRM isn't set up so that it's easy to track or automatically tracking, then your AI platform is then lacking those data points to actually make meaningful understanding of what's going on. So I'd say that's kind of my big asterisk on a lot of this stuff, is that it doesn't work if you don't have a really good kind of like all-in-one or 360-degree view of how your customers and prospects engage with your business pre-sale and post-sale. So that's just my little kind of disclaimer for folks listening. But I'd say like the way, if I think of kind of the way we use it, right, is like we're starting to look at kind of through the review process when someone's telling us about the software stack that they use and what products are good and what aren't good. We're starting to then build like predictive models and make recommendations on what other people like them have had success with. So if they tell us that, they're a small or medium business and they have a small budget and they're looking for CRM, our platform is starting to use AI and ML to start to work out then like, okay, based on, customers that look similar to this person, like what have they had success with? What haven't they had success with? And can we facilitate automatic introductions and things like that? And then that's kind of always learning and getting better, right? Based on once someone buys something, we'll then be asking them for inputs around, how was the implementation? What's going on well? So, that's how we use it in some certain capacities. But I think when I think of like the marketing funnel specifically, I don't know if there's a whole lot of great like platforms today that are using it. If you think of, what's happening in the chatbot space and with some of like the different comms platforms out there today, I'd say that's like, you're really sort of more basic AI and machine learning. And I think it's, has that big sort of banner around it. But, if you look deep down, you probably see that it's really, really basic, if not just like sort of simple logic that's going on in the background. So look, I don't know if there's a whole lot of really great platforms that are doing it really well, to be honest, Neil, because even if they're trying to do it right, like we use HubSpot at G2 Crowd. I brought that in when I started here because I'm a big fan of the platform. And HubSpot's platform has really great AI and ML capabilities. But if you're launching it brand new for say like predictive lead scoring or something like that, it takes a long time to get enough data in there. And if you're a small business, you realistically might not ever have enough data. So look, it's a tough one.
Absolutely. And I suppose really, no matter how great any technology is or any salesman that turns up saying it's got AI, or no matter how shiny or how appealing it is, it's not going to solve the garbage in, garbage out problem, is it? You've got to clean
it doesn't. It doesn't, right? And if you look at kind of even companies like Google, who, obviously I really admire Google. And if you have ever used, I'm sure many people listening have used Google Analytics before, or even their new Google kind of like dashboarding tool, which I'm having a mental blank on what the name of it is. They all have kind of these sorts of like smart insights that are coming from AI and machine learning. But at the end of the day, if you have a look at them, a lot of them are still pretty basic stuff because they don't have enough context oftentimes to understand like what you care about. And I think that's where, when I think of technology today and where it needs to improve to leverage AI better and big data better, is that it needs to like be asking more contextual questions about your business more, and most importantly, I find. So if you're using, a new email marketing tool, or if you're using a new CRM, or if you're using Google Data Studio, which was that tool that I couldn't remember before, I really oftentimes find is that like the product teams that build those tools focus so much on like the end features that they don't think enough about like getting information when someone first signs up, even if it's freemium online, around like what business are you in, who do you sell to, what's your average sales price. And look, if it's a CRM and it can get average sales price and sales cycle data, great. But if not, like you should be asking some of these metrics so that then you can make smarter predictions based on that context, because you might not realize, the predictions. And that's what I find a lot of the time, is that most people never actually use those features of the tools because the recommendations aren't good enough.
Now, I also read that technology on inbound marketing is also causing unexpected disruption in HR. Is that something that you've got experience with that you could expand on too?
Yeah, look, I actually spoke about a year ago at this really big HR summit in Singapore, all about this kind of concept of inbound recruiting. And I kind of think inbound is, kind of a one concept and way to think about marketing, right? In the sense of trying to attract people to your business, as opposed to attracting them with content, things that they're actively looking for, versus say interrupting them with things that like you're assuming they're looking for, but you might not be, sure about. So like a billboard's a good example of interrupting someone, in the sense that like, if there's a Burberry ad up there, most people that are looking at that, like, how do you know they're in the market for Burberry? You don't. So that's kind of, I guess, just like high level, the concept of inbound at its most basic level for someone listening. But, I think where it's interesting in regard to the inbound recruiting space is that I kind of like just view everything as a marketer as a funnel. So, whether, if you're recruiting people, there's at the top of the funnel, there's, the total addressable market of candidates that you could be hiring. And then there's, those active folks that are actively looking, as the next stage. And then there's alongside those active folks that are looking, there's, your people that are passive. So they're not actively looking, but they might be amazing. And so what I really think is interesting with inbound recruiting is it helps you tap in a little bit more to those passive candidates. And the passive candidates typically are the ones that are the really good candidates, because folks typically that are more actively looking for a job, I don't know. I just, from my experience, like whenever I've hired an amazing person, like I've been going out looking for them specifically. And the stats seem to support that. But so the kind of idea of inbound recruiting is you're using inbound marketing tactics like creating content that your future employee would be looking for before they know that they want a job. So a good example might be like, let's say there's like a rock star manager at, another tech company. They might be Googling things like, how to be a better boss, or how to run amazing one-on-ones with my team, or how to, who knows, all sorts of things like that, how to have a hard conversation with my employee. And so if you have content, if your HR team with support from marketing creates content on, say, your culture blog for your website, for your business, around kind of those questions that, you think, and you can then kind of validate with Google data that high quality candidates would be searching for, you can then get them to your job site before they even realize they may need a new job. So let's use that example I gave before. Say there's a manager that's looking to improve their skills, and anyone that wants to be always learning, it's probably a little bit better than most candidates in general that aren't maybe proactively looking to learn. So if they came to your blog post around, some things that you can do, 10 ways that you can be a better manager, you might then have, a call to action midway through that blog post or at the end of it that says something like, PS, we have some amazing management positions open at company X. And here are some of our perks, learn more, right? And so now you're taking someone that wasn't actively in the market and, you're getting them into your own recruiting funnel. So that's kind of where I would say there's alignment and kind of disruption in that space. It's not so much that inbound recruiting is disrupting the recruiting model. It's just, say, a more effective way to get in front of those passive candidates. But by having them lead the conversation, as opposed to your HR team needing to kind of crawl through LinkedIn and find those candidates. And they should obviously be doing that as well. Outbound recruiting has its value too. But inbound recruiting can work really well for kind of those more junior and mid-level roles.
So are you seeing the entire recruitment process taking a shift there?
Yeah, well, I think there's recruitment's gone through a few different phases over the last sort of 10, 20 years, right? So if you think of kind of recruiting 1.0 was really all about kind of spray and pray, in the sense of, using recruiting forums and putting jobs out there. And the problem with that, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is that it's only going to get those job ads, those job recs in front of people that are actively looking. So I'd say that's still something that, companies should do. And, tools like Greenhouse, and if anyone's in the market for these tools, can just search HR recruiting software, and then they'll most likely come to G2 Crowd and they can see, really objective reviews from people that use these tools to get recommendations for what they should use. But, if they're using those tools, they're only going to be helping you get those jobs out on those job boards. And so then sort of 2.0 recruiting in my mind was really that kind of referral model that businesses started to employ, whereby they would say to employees, hey, we will give you $2,500, $5,000 if we hire someone that you refer to us. And again, you should still be doing that as a business. That's a really good way to help grow your base of employees and get other really strong candidates. The only kind of asterisk I would put on that is that typically what happens, and you see this with a lot of executive teams, is, if we know from statistics that most CEOs today are still men, and that's slowly changing, which is awesome. But most people will hire then, unfortunately, without realizing, people that are like them, not because they're, explicitly most likely trying to do that. It's just because their peer group and their maybe career group and professional group will most likely be people that look more like them, whether that's the same race or the same sex or the same sexuality or in the same location. And so I think the downside with then only that 2.0 recruiting is that your team starts to become very similar and it lacks diversity. And, we know that having more diverse teams, especially in leadership, helps, businesses achieve better goals. So that would kind of be like 2.0. Again, you should still be doing it, but it's not enough. And then 3.0 in my mind is when you start to, build in concepts of inbound marketing to your recruiting funnel. So recruiting 3.0 is that inbound recruiting. So whether that's, doing a Q&A with hiring managers, whereby like they maybe record on a video with a HR person, the person that they're looking for, like the dream candidate that we're looking for, this new director of blah role at our business is someone that loves doing this and someone that has experience at these kinds of companies. And doing that, right, would not only help people have content that they can share with maybe a peer of theirs that looks like, someone that has the skill set that might be great for this job, but it helps then that candidate better understand the culture of your business. And if they better understand the culture before they get into that process, they can kind of self-select or deselect themselves in or out based on if they are a good fit for that culture. So hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And if we just go back to marketing for a moment, if we take something like AI and machine learning technologies, have you had any experience of how they could, or you've seen them influence your own campaigns significantly?
Look, gosh, I'm not totally sure. I've seen many good examples in businesses that I've worked for and across other businesses. I mean, I'm meeting with CMOs at some of the world's most innovative companies every other day. And, whether that's recording podcasts with them, myself, and asking them questions or just getting mentored from them. And I really think that there's just not a whole lot of great examples out there today. There's some interesting platforms, I think, that are starting to now help you get more data around, say, prospects in your database, or, they're connecting website activity to the CRM to start to build a bit more kind of robust understanding of some of the implicit signals that are coming from people before, like maybe they explicitly fill out a form, and there can be some interesting predictive models there. But again, it's still pretty basic with regard to kind of helping, I think, marketers or sales prioritize accounts. I'm really kind of, I don't want to kind of like give you a response and fluffy it and say that like I've seen that good kind of work here. I really haven't seen that much. And I think the closest that I am seeing is sort of what we touched on before around sort of like the use of conversational AI and semantic kind of search. And I think there's some interesting stuff happening there. And there's a few vendors that I'm kind of like following. HubSpot's one of them and Drift is another. But yeah, there's not really a good kind of in the middle yet between like the data platforms that allow you to, interrogate data like Looker or Insight Squared. And then on the other side, kind of like your marketing automation platforms, and then your other platforms that help you get more data into your system, whether that's, demographic data or whatnot. But yeah, I'm really not sure I've seen anything that good there. And maybe that means I'm a horrible CMO, but everyone I speak to, when I get down to the nitty gritty of it, I think there's still like, we're still having difficulties with attribution, right? Like that's not even like that's, has nothing to do with AI and machine learning. But if platforms can't even kind of build attribution, how can they then start to make recommendations or do things smart? So yeah, sorry, Neil.
It's so refreshing to hear you say just that, because I think everybody's kind of a little bit worn down with the whole exaggerating of capabilities and hype. And we are living in an age of instant gratification where everybody wants things or expects things like yesterday. But the reality is we're heading towards Web 3.0. It's an incredibly exciting time. We've got emerging technologies such as AI, such as machine learning and blockchain. And it's huge transformational change we're talking about. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is. And if I think of still today, right, like when, there's some interesting stuff, I think, around like ad optimization that might like that leans on a little bit of AI. I'd say like where some interesting spaces where I would love to see it move more quickly is definitely around sort of web personalization. And I think today, you've got some great platforms out there. HubSpot's on the more simple end, and then you've got sort of your Adobe sort of CQ kind of experience sort of platforms like Sitecore, et cetera, that kind of do, really advanced kind of website personalization and whatnot. But it still really like leans on that marketer or that developer to input kind of the parameters around like what we should personalize, right? So like, if the viewer is from a country right now where the temperature is below zero, show a photo of our winter product versus our summer product, right? Like that's all built still today by someone in marketing most likely that's driving that like basic logic. And I think where I would love to see websites start to go, and there's a few interesting sites that I've seen come through TechCrunch recently and get some interesting Series A and B funding that are starting to actually not ask you those questions, that they are constantly evolving and testing their own images on site for different segments, and then starting to optimize themselves automatically. Now that I think is kind of interesting. That's like very early days, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of problems that arise with that too when a system is making all of those decisions alone. And like starts to change text to increase conversion rates, but then maybe it's starting to lie about the product. Like that's kind of interesting, but then we're starting to get into kind of this whole like Elon Musk debate around like where robots and AI goes. So yeah, I don't know. That's where I would love to see more innovation is around the web experience and true like intelligent personalization.
I think as well, it feels right now very similar to when the internet first arrived. And when I don't mean when it was very first invented or as a concept, but when it was just starting to come in through dial-up in the mid-90s, and then the noughties we had broadband speeds, and there was a lot of excitement about the opportunities ahead. But again, it took time, didn't it?
And I think this is where like I guess I think a little bit like jaded because I feel like software companies oftentimes sell this vaporware idea of like what a tool can do without oftentimes telling you that like your business isn't going to be big enough. You're not going to have enough data to actually leverage this tool. And so I think, having worked at software companies and, having been guilty myself without realizing that, we were promoting vaporware at certain businesses, a while back. I think they're kind of a little bit at fault really around some of this stuff because, naturally jumping onto the new sexy thing helps sales, tell a really convincing story and a really future forward story. That a lot of the time, the legwork that goes into some of those success stories that you might see on stage at big conferences, there might be millions worth of consulting and custom work that was done. Like this wasn't really done by a platform. This was done by people that built the platform for this specific use case. And so I don't know, that's sort of where I think that like, we've still got a long way to go before the tools can start to really like leverage themselves and do things interestingly. And, a space that I've started to toy with myself is, we create a lot of content at G2 Crowd on our Learn blog. So it's learn.g2crowd.com. And so, we have guides on there for how people can use CRM, how they can, build their marketing funnels, like everything basically for any piece of software. We have like the free strategy docs around that. And we were sort of looking at like how we could scale up our content faster. And we found some really interesting kind of AI companies that, you can put in like a blog post, some example blog posts around the content that you want to create. And their platform then starts to kind of like robotically through AI and ML start to like build a draft of what a blog post could look like. And, the problem with those is that like the quality of them is pretty horrible and still needs then a human to kind of get involved. And when that human then gets involved, like oftentimes they have to like rework the whole thing, and it would have been faster to just have a human do it. So, it's starting in a few different spaces, but a long way to go for sure.
Quite relieved you said that as well. It means I'm not going out of business in the next year.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, what I would love to see more stuff though around kind of like companies building software that allows content to be more multi-channel in a easier fashion, right? So, let's say you and I had video on right now for this, like, a platform that would automatically, I guess, be able to like listen to our tone of voice for certain sections of this and create little clips where it thinks based on our enthusiasm and maybe the rate of which we're talking that like, oh, this seems like a really interesting part of the conversation. Let's create some snippets here. So that Neil then has prepackaged examples of like all of the things that are good. Maybe it automatically marks out areas where there was like a swear or a disconnection with audio to make your job easier. That's kind of interesting, I think. But yeah, look, I think we're not there yet, and I think we'll all be in business for a long time further.
That's a great idea you just mentioned, though. You need to package that up pretty quick. So if we take a holistic view of everything that we've spoke about today, can you tell me a little bit more about how G2 is bridging the gap between software and non-profit community?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are really passionate about helping communities, that are less fortunate. And so we've actually always from, when we were created, had a really strong program called G2 Gives. And so, obviously, like first up, our website's completely free to use for anyone, regardless of whether they're in, for-profit or not for profit. So that alone, right, allows non-profits that might not have as much funding, whereby they can't maybe get their own analysts to help them do a review, use our 500,000 plus reviews from other nonprofits like them to be able to say like, cool, what are people that look like me, nonprofit companies, like what have they used to help them, grow their business in different ways through marketing, sales, recruiting, etc. So that's, I guess, like that one component whereby we're totally free. But that G2 Gives program that I mentioned on a little earlier is for every review that someone comes to our site, we oftentimes will offer them a gift card, and they can redeem that gift card themselves through Amazon if they want, or they could donate that gift card to charity. And so, I'm not sure how much money we've raised over the last few years. It's definitely in the hundreds of thousands, I believe. But we basically convert that money then into a few different charities. But the biggest one is called New Story, and we help build homes around the world. So, we've built dozens of homes in Haiti. And all of those reviews from people that are coming to our site are then actually not only being used on the web, but like we're using their credit to then, if they ask us to put that forward to the G2 Gives program. So that's been a really nice thing to come to G2 Crowd and see that like built into the DNA of the company is giving back. And so it's a pretty cool program.
So here we are in 2019 with a year of opportunity ahead of us. So I've got to ask, what will 2019 have in store for yourself, G2 Crowd, and also the democratization of the software industry? Are there any big meaty things that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, good question. So I think for me, like in the team, when I joined about a year ago at G2 Crowd, the marketing team was pretty small. I want to say there was maybe like half a dozen, so 6 or 7 people on the team. And fast forward 12 months, I think the team's at around 30 people just in marketing alone, and the business is growing really quickly. So I think like last year for me was really that year of like building all of the foundations for our marketing programs so that we could help more and more buyers. And we've grown our monthly the monthly buyers that we're helping on our site, exponentially over the last year, which has been really exciting to see. And our new content and our learning hub that I mentioned earlier has been growing at something like kind of like 60%, like 20 to 60% week on week, like depending on kind of holidays and things like that. So crazy growth. So we just really want to build on that is where I think me and the team are at. In terms of kind of like G2 Crowd, I mean, we obviously announced that acquisition of Siftery a few months ago, and that was a really exciting thing for us because I think that starts to kind of like connect some of the dots, because previously you could only really discover and select software through our site. But now with Siftery, you can actually buy software through our site as well as then track it. And I think that's really, really important because, from some research that we've been doing and working with some other research providers, we've found that the average small, medium business uses over 100 different pieces of software, which is insane. And then the average enterprise uses over like 1,200 pieces of software. So if you think of, your marketing teams, your sales teams, your HR teams, like everyone, your finance teams, there's so much software involved. And so software spend's increasing exponentially each year, which is great for the tech industry. And it's great for businesses because they can grow faster and more reliably. But it also means that like there's a lot more risk in terms of making decisions, and if you look at, Scott Brinker's really awesome MarTech landscape, right, whereby like just the marketing tool set alone, there's, tens of, I don't know how many thousand products there are today, but there's like 5,000 plus, I think. That's not getting kind of smaller anytime soon. And so, it's a risky thing when you're a small business or even a big business and you're making decisions about software, because when you make the right decision, that's great for your business. It can help you reach your potential and your growth goals faster. But when you make the wrong decision in software, you typically don't realize for a few years, right? And so you might not be hitting those goals, not because your team is doing anything wrong, but because you actually just don't have the right software for you. So I'd say that's like what we're really passionate about, is helping people like realize like how well they're using their software, helping them save money with regard to their software utilization. But then I think that, we really want to kind of continue to transform the way businesses buy software. So they're buying the right software for themselves from the first time they buy something, and, they're not buying something that's wrong for them.
Well, I've got a sneaking suspicion we've whet the appetite of a lot of people listening today, and we've covered a lot of ground in a short space of time. So could I just ask that you remind the listeners of where they can find G2 Crowd online, and also maybe contact a member of your team if they're left with any burning questions that they'd like to reach out to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so, if you want to connect with G2 Crowd, I'm sure most people, if you're in the tech space, have been on our site before, even without potentially realizing, but naturally it's g2crowd.com. If you want to reach out to someone at G2 Crowd and there's forms on our site, obviously, depending on what you're looking for, by all means, feel free to, go through that route. But, if you have a question more about kind of something I've spoken about today or me or G2 even, I'm really happy for folks just to tweet me directly, which is, my name is my Twitter handle. So Ryan Bonnici, and that's Bonnici. And it's the same handle on LinkedIn and Instagram. And if folks want to email me if they have a question, it's just rbonnici@g2crowd.com.
Fantastic. Well, I love what you guys are doing at G2 Crowd. I also really respect your honesty today as well, and not exaggerating any capabilities of technologies right now, but also for sharing your story and where it all began, and really highlighting the power of having conversations with people wherever you are in the world and whatever it is that you're doing. So, but more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Neil. It was really fun chat. Thank you.
I love Ryan's personal journey about how he met an executive from Microsoft randomly on a flight one day, which launched him into his career in marketing for some of the world's largest and fastest growing companies such as HubSpot, Salesforce, ExactTarget, and so many more. And his story reminded me of somebody else I had on the show a few months ago, where he flew all the way to the US from Southeast Asia. He got there, made his pitch at the meeting, and things didn't work out. And he found himself waiting at the luggage carousel, feeling sorry for himself. But then he got chatting to the person next to him, who went on to become his business partner. Never underestimate the power of a simple conversation. And I genuinely believe that the universe gives us all that little nudge in the right direction sometimes. And we just need to be open-minded and read the signs. But maybe that's just my annual trips to the Glastonbury Music Festival every year that's turning me into a bit of an old hippie. But it was also refreshing to hear Ryan talk candidly about the current capabilities of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how the exciting stuff is still yet to come. And also, there will never be a shiny technological solution that will fix the problem of garbage in, garbage out. So get your data clean. And don't let a salesman tell you otherwise. But what were your takeaways? Please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. And if you're feeling particularly generous, why not leave a cheeky review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts so we can get some love off their pesky algorithm. So I'll return tomorrow with another great guest, and hopefully we can all learn a thing or two along the way too. But more than anything, just a big thank you for listening to the show today, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.